Everyone, welcome to Writer's Lunch. This week, I am your host. My name is Daphne Strassert. I will be talking about building tension with romance. So how do you sweet your readers off their feet? First up, I am Daphne Strassert. Like I said, I am a author and editor, specializes in writing romance. I also edit horror and speculative fiction of all kinds. I am the review coordinator for an independent press, horroraddicts.net, and I am the founder of Dallas Fiction Writers. What does it mean to write a romance? We're not necessarily talking about romance genre today. These principles apply more broadly than that. But what does it mean to write a romance as a subplot versus romance as a genre? So, if you're writing the romance genre, romance is the focus of your story. The relationship between your characters is the focus of the story. You must have a happily ever after or a happily for now. So, your characters have to end up at the end, they have to be happy about it, and it has to look like they're going to be together for the foreseeable future. If you don't have those things, if you're not focused on a romantic relationship and you don't have a happily ever after, you're not genre romance. That does not mean that you're not writing a romantic book, but you're not writing what is considered genre romance, and you shouldn't market it that way because you'll make readers very angry. Now, if you have romance as a subplot, romance exists in the story, but it's not necessarily the central focus. So you don't necessarily have to have a happy ending. The characters don't have to necessarily get together. You might also have multiple relationships over the course of your story. You can have a character who's with someone and then they break up, or that person dies and then they're with another person. That would be romance. Could be a major plot, but it is not necessarily a genre of romance. So, for example, the Hunger Games have a romance subplot, but Twilight is a romance. Or Charlaine Harris's the True Blood books, those have romance as a subplot, whereas J.R. Ward Dark Lover series, that is going to be this is the Black Dagger Brotherhood. This is romance as a genre. It focuses on the romantic relationships and it has a happily ever after. Get that out of the way, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be talking about this in general. So, when we are creating romantic tension in your story, it's not just about the words you use on the page, it's about how you've built it into your characters, how you've built it into the plot. So, the easiest way to create tension is to start at the point where you were talking about your characters and who they are, and you're building them up. Because if you create the tension there, then it comes across in your scenes more organically. Directly into your characters. Characters need to be individually interesting. If you have one character that's really interesting and one character that's really boring, it can feel as if the boring character is just kind of like there, right? They're just there to be a love interest. And you don't want that. You want your characters to all be being on their own, and that makes their relationship itself more interesting. So when you think about each of your characters, what are their motivations? What do each of them want? And please don't make the motivation simply to be with the other person. Their interests, what are their fears, what are their experiences, and make sure that you leave room for them to grow. It's always most interesting to see both characters change for the other person so that they can be better together. It also makes them better individually. How do your characters balance each other? How does a character the other one's strengths and weaknesses shine out? And what do you do if someone's more interested in the other? So, for example, in this book by M.L. Preston, one character is a literal rock star. The other person is not. They're a normal person. He is just happens to be her client. And so rock stars are innately interesting. So how do you make her interesting? Well, you would have to talk about her motivations. Why does working with this person, is it a matter for like a last chance for her, as it says on the cover? What is it about their relationship or their situation that makes this a compelling story for her? We don't want to just have reading about the rock star. We want to be reading about their relationship. To think about your characters as a cohesive unit. They're balancing each other. They're joined by their commonalities. They're pulled apart by their differences. If they're too similar, then they might be considered boring. If they're so similar that they just get along all the time and they're always happy together and there's no friction, then there's no drama in your story. There's nothing that's making us question, will this relationship work out? If they are too different, then we're wondering why we want them together at all. If all they are is at each other's throats, then there's nothing that joins them that makes us say, yeah, I want to see them together. It's particularly important when you're talking about the enemies to lovers trope. Have to think very hard in the enemies to lovers. What is it that they are eventually going to see in each other? What is it that makes them admire each other, even if they are at odds in the beginning? In Red, White, and Royal Blue, we have an American and a Brit. They're from a conservative family versus a liberal family, but they are both very much joined by their lives being taken over by politics. They're joined by the fact that they are both constantly in the spotlight, also having these differences. For example, The Duke and I. This is Bridgerton. If you've seen season one or if you've read the book, this will be a familiar story for you. But what is similar? They are both from this upper class society where we have the constant scrutiny and the pressure to be perfect and the pressure for heirs and for wealth. They're both from that same society. They both grew up with wealth. They both grew up with very um, high expectations for them, and they are attracted to each other. Is there differences? Well, even though they had a similar upbringing, his was extremely harsh that left him with no love for family. Hers was extremely warm, and she has a very close family. She really wants to have a large family, have children, and he does not. And that is the absolute core of their conflict is that he does not want to have family, and she does. His upbringing has left him very jaded and very cold and feeling as if he cannot someone. And that holds him back from being with her fully. He also has a relationship as being a rake, being a kind of a fuckboy, whereas she has a very pure and proper reputation. So you can see how they have similarities, things that are going to bring them together. They also have things that are going to innately cause conflict. What can your characters have in common and what can make them different? So here's some options. They could share a profession, hobbies, values, outlook on life experiences, station in society, goals, fears, sexual interests, friends, and family. Could have those things be things that tear them apart. So if one person is extremely ambitious and the other person is pretty happy with themselves, that can be a source of conflict. Generally, if you're doing genre romance, sexual interests have to align because you want them to be experiencing their sexual interests together and in both enjoying them. So that is one where I would say that's probably not a good one to have them be at odds on because it can make some kind of icky things happen when we're talking about consent and everybody being on board with what happens sexually. This is a good list to kind of pick and choose from if you're crafting your characters. So, for example, create some characters together. This is in for a romance that I have been working on. So this is a tech CEO romance. Russell and we have Alice. Russell is 35, Alice is 25, putting a little bit of an age gap there. People love a little bit of an age gap. Russell is wealthy. He runs a really successful startup company, and Alice is a brilliant programmer who works for him. Has a strained relationship with his family. He was abandoned at 15 and worked his way up on his own. Alice has a lot of family that she is responsible for caring for and is kind of struggling to get by as a result of that. Russell is jaded and Alice has a sunny outlook on life. They have in common. They're hardworking. They both love technology. Both have family issues, although they have very different family issues. Is both, I guess, both a commonality and a difference. They both are going to believe that they're making the world a better place through whatever technology they're developing. The difference is that she thinks it's important to rely on others, and he is toxically independent. So this is something that comes up over and over again. So she has the big family, she relies on others, she thinks that the sunny disposition. He's jaded. His family abandoned him. He does not want to rely on others, and so it has made him extremely independent. Other difference is he's really wealthy and she's really poor. And that brings up a lot of problems, right? So he might not understand the issues that she's facing, as she may want to pay her way and not have him simply support her. He is extremely alone and she has a ton of people in her life. Questions so far on baking it into your characters? No? Okay, great. Does anyone have any other ideas for these characters that we could put into them going forward? Anything else, any other opportunities that you see? Thank you, Charlie. Charlie says it's very helpful.
If they both believe in making the world a better place, can you have them view them different, like view what that means differently so that they have something else that can also kind of break them apart while still forging that bond?
Yeah, that's a good point. That could be something where wants to use the technology in a certain way, he wants to use it in a different way, and both of them think that's helpful, but they disagree with each other on it. Also, a good way to bring conflict into their working relationship. So far in our characters, we have them basically work in common and their personal lives different.
Charlie says, because he's in a toxic environment and she is not. Some other things too. They've
How will he create a better place with his vision of the relationship if he's in a toxic environment and she is not? I think that people in bad situations can still want to make the world a better place, but it might be a little harder for them to see it, especially if you're jaded. And onward. So motivating forces, internal and external pressure. If you have ever watched any of my presentations previously on how to write romance, how to write romance, how to write romance series, how to write sexual intimacy in your stories. Motivating forces is a big thing that I talk about. So this is internal and external forces acting on your characters. Internal forces exist in your characters' minds and it exists only between them in their relationship. So this can be their attraction, their shared goals, their common interests. External forces are what exist outside your characters. So they exert influence on their relationship and on their from the outside. So this could be family, friends that happen to them, other organizations, things that are trying to force your characters to behave in a certain way that might conflict with their internal choices. So the most common way this plays out in romance is the external forces are trying to pull the characters apart while their internal chemistry is trying to keep them together. The narrative overall focuses on overcoming common obstacles. This is your typical romance. So for example, your characters want to date, but their families hate each other. That's Romeo and Juliet. Characters want to date, but they're being torn apart by their different jobs that are trying to move them across the country. Characters want to date, but they're from rival mafia families, things like that. So you have external forces pulling your characters apart while they're trying to keep each other together. This is when you have external forces holding them together and your characters don't want to be together. This is going to be in things like enemies to lover, marriages, fated mates, um, anything where just one bed at the end, anything where the external circumstances are holding them together. So this is kind of prejudice in a like roundabout way where they don't like each other, or at least she doesn't like him, but they keep running into each other and things are holding them together. Or they don't like each other, but he's her bodyguard. Or they don't like each other, but they're stuck on this cruise ship together. Like each other, but they're stuck working on this project together. That's those kind of things. Now, with your external forces holding the couple together, it's important that at some point in the story, you have to swap it because at some point the characters have to want to be together. At that point, you go and you look back at this. So, about halfway through your book, your characters decide they like each other and they're holding the relationship together, and external forces shift to then try to pull them apart. So, it was an arranged marriage to begin with. They didn't like each other, but now that they like each other, his family's not so sure they wanted them to be together in the first place. Or now there's new rivals coming in, and there's his ex-girlfriend's trying to tear them apart. External forces holding them together, that only works in your story so far. Eventually, it's going to reverse. Questions on that? Oh, there's things in my chat. Quarantine lovers, thank you, Shannon. Not the cruise ship, hantavirus. Yeah. Sorry, that was on my mind. I was reading an article before we started. Somebody go write the hantavirus story.
Yeah, they're gonna have 2 months to have to deal with each other before they can come out to decide whether they want to spend the rest of their lives together.
Case of our example, we are working with this one. Our characters like each other, but there are external forces that are causing conflict. They do still have some internal conflict, but it is not the main issue. So, what obstacles stand in your character's way? Could be disapproving family, distance, social pressure, an office policy, which we'll come back to later, a wealth gap, a traumatic past, health concerns, business rivalry, dishonesty, a meddling ex, mistaken identity, jealousy, value conflict, or fear of commitment, which is very common in romance novels. So, for example, this is Player. This is a hockey romance. It is a best friend to lovers hockey romance. So The internal forces are their friendship, their attraction, and they both kind of like need to feel desired. For her from a sexual perspective, him from a personality perspective, because he's used to being used sexually, but not anyone actually wanting him. Internally, things that are keeping them apart is his meddling ex, bad reputation, and the threat of expulsion. So she is tutoring him so that he doesn't get kicked out of college. Put friendship on the external side, or friendship is an internal motivator, both and it keeps them together and tears them apart kind of way. Because as with most friends to lovers, you have the of if I pursue a romantic relationship with this person, what if I lose the friendship that we had? So it can work both ways. Uh, the person in the comments said he's the most ripped friend I've ever had. It's not beating any of the like shirtless men allegations with this romance cover. Okay, so let's create some motivating forces for a tech CEO romance. Keeping them together. A large project with a looming deadline. She works for him and they've got something going on that they need to get done, and that's why they're spending so much time together. There's attraction because this is going to be a romance book. But it feels like it's missing something, right? That doesn't feel like enough. We need to give them something more shared to bond over. So one thought I had was that perhaps there's a homeless youth that they're helping. Be a good connection between their two pasts, right? So he was abandoned by his family, so he's going to feel some connection with someone who's in a similar situation. She is a bleeding heart and is more likely to help people than he is because he is jaded. And so you can have this shared need to help someone that brings them together, as well as it gives us another character for to bounce off of. So when you are writing romance, sure that you don't just have two characters. You need to have people for them to interact with outside of each other so that you can have different perspectives. This gives us another character. So what else is pulling them apart? The wealth gap. As with many of these kind of billionaire romances, love interest is going to not want to just be treated, right? As fun as the what lures people in with the billionaire romance is kind of the luxury of it all, and he can pay for everything, and you never have to worry about anything ever again. I also like to see is that she pushes back on it. She doesn't just like him for his money, so it's got to cause some conflict. He can't just solve everything by throwing money at it. That can pull them apart. Her family asking too much of her. So her family is not necessarily this boon that you would think it would be. They've shown her about love and all that stuff. That's great, but they can also be a time suck. If her sister is always having her babysit, and so she can't be working when she needs to be working, or she needs to give them money to help with expenses, even though she doesn't have a lot of money herself, or she needs to spend time with them, even though she doesn't have time to spend with them. That can cause friction when there's a large project looming. Trust issues and traumatic past will, of course, come back to haunt him. He doesn't trust that she's going to stay around because he has abandonment issues, and that's reasonable. But it can still cause friction in their relationship. But I feel like, again, we're missing something. We need something more. So, like, disapproving colleagues that don't like them being together. I mean, there is an age gap, so that's always an issue. No dating policy in their office. That would be seriously problematic. So, those are all things that we can consider forward with what's causing tension in the relationship. So far, let's move forward. Oh, chat. Plot points. So these are that are in most romance novels that you want to consider as you're creating your plot. The meet cute. The meet cute happens with every romance. This is when your characters meet. Daphne, what if they're already friends? This is when your characters see each other as romantic. If your characters are strangers, you have a standard meet cute. So that's when they meet each other, how their lives become intertwined, and they see an initial attraction to each other. If your characters already know each other, it's when they see each other from a new perspective. So they were best friends before, but suddenly he's a romantic prospect, or suddenly she's romantically available. It does not have to be cute. Call it the meet cute, but that it does not have to be cute. It can be he saves her from a rival mafia gang. And that's less cute and more scary, but it still has them meet. It intertwines their lives and it draws them to each other. It's a ticking clock. So this is something external that is hanging over your characters' heads and is coming for their happiness. It is this is the external force that's going to drive the climax of your story. The climax of your story, when you're talking about a romance, is not necessarily a breakup. It is something that could tear them apart, internal or external. Readers should feel this coming. So it needs to be introduced early and it needs to kind of, you see it progressing where it's like getting closer to them as the story is moving forward. It can be external enemies, so that rival mafia family we were talking about, or it can be a personal secret. So he is hiding from her that let's do dark romance because why not? So dark romance, he's hiding that he's actually her stalker. And she keeps getting closer to finding out that that's him. You see it coming, and as a reader, it builds the tension because you see that this is going to have an impact on their relationship. And it has to have a real impact on their relationship. It has to be a true threat. If there's not a threat of them and not ending up together, it doesn't feel like true tension. Now, I said earlier that with romance genre, you are guaranteed a happily ever after, and that is true, but that doesn't mean that the threat shouldn't feel real. You should be able to see it going either way, right? They know that there's going to be happily ever after because this is genre romance, but technically in another world, it could work out otherwise. So something is coming for your character's happiness. It's a secret that she's keeping from him, or that he's keeping from her. It's a X. It's a job promotion that is going to separate them, or a firing that's going to separate them. Something like that. Balance your tension. So it's a lot about how to build the tension, but you also need to give them periods where it relaxes. Something where they can enjoy their time together, and we as a reader see what makes them like each other. So we get to see this glimpse of what the true happy relationship between them could be after the happily ever after. We want to see like soft moments, not just the sex scenes. If you want to learn more about writing sex scenes, that's a different post that I did last time. But not just sex scenes, but like tender moments, sharing dinners, holding hands, the dog play on the carpet, something that establishes common ground, allows them to kind of fall more in love with each other outside of the ticking clock situation. There's always a decision point. So this is usually the climax of your story. Its tension is the highest, everything's working against them, and ultimately they decide to stick together and overcome it. That is the decision point. So, like I said, in a romance novel, this would be the climax of the book. Characters are facing overwhelming odds, but they decide that the best way to face it is to be together rather than letting it tear them apart. For example, Tyrant, and I'm gonna wholeheartedly recommend this book. I know it looks, but if you like sci-fi romance and you like aliens, you know what? You can do a whole lot worse. Trust me, this is actually one that I've enjoyed. Me Cute happens when a ship of women scientists land on an alien world. They are saved by aliens. Saved slash kidnapped. Language barrier, so you're not entirely sure. So the ticking clock is survival in this harsh environment, as well as a looming fight between these rival alien tribes. Balance the tension by learning to love the world and the people. So you get to see them break the language barrier. They figure out how to talk to each other, learn about the alien plants and the alien wildlife and the people and their culture, and they come to love that about each other. And then ultimate decision point in this is that they decide that they're not going to keep trying to leave the world. They're going to stay and make a life here, then continue to try and contact Earth. Recommend this one. I've read like 7 out of the series. It's a lot of fun. They're very popcorn reads. Ursa Dax writes incredible romance, especially sci-fi romance. And if you want to understand how to structure romance books, I recommend you read them because she does a really good job of playing by the beats. You are always hitting the notes at the right moment, right? You're always getting a really satisfying climax out of them. Let's create some plot points for our story, the tech CEO romance. We got to meet Cute. So we already established that she works for him. So how, if they're in this company together, how does he not already know her? Because it's a company and sometimes you don't meet your CEO, but he is coming over to take over the project because it's not going well and it's vital to the company's survival. So we already have our ticking clock. The project is vital to the company's survival. So the project has to go well. There's a deadline for the project. Otherwise, the company's going to go out under. She's going to lose this job. They'll never see each other again. Our ticking clock. It's also her livelihood, so she cares about it beyond just any sort of romantic relationship. He's sunk too many resources into this project. So if he doesn't succeed, what's bad for him? He loses control of his company that he worked so hard to create. So we have our meet cute, and our meet cute already establishes our ticking clock. So we're going to be feeling that throughout the story, that tension of when it, like, we have to get this project done. How close are we to getting this project done? Balancing that tension together. So we have, they're going to work together, but let's make it romantic. Let's have them work together at his place, right? So that they're a little cozier, so they aren't always seeing each other in suits or business casual. They go to dinner, maybe because he realized that she isn't eating enough because she's poor, but also let's bring in the homeless person that we talked about earlier. So the homeless kid. So maybe she gave her lunch to the homeless kid. So the balancing tension can also their interactions with this other character. Cool. So obviously a setback in the project, something that makes it look like they're not going to meet their deadline, or an investor pulls out, or something like that. Um, Another obstacle, some tension that we talked about earlier, is something with her family. So maybe her sister dropped off her kids unexpectedly, and she can't go into work. Alice can't go into work that day. Family reappears out of the blue after they abandoned him. Sets him spiraling because he doesn't know how to handle that emotionally. The homeless kid runs off, and now they're both worried about what happens here. Then finally, our decision point. So remember when I said that everybody's got to grow in this? Yeah, everybody's got to grow. So she has to learn to stand up for herself and tell her family no when it's really important. So a decision point here is she tells her sister, "No, I'm sorry. I cannot do it this time. I do have an important meeting." She sets the boundary, she puts her foot down. She grows a little as a person. A decision point for him would be either asking someone for help, right? Which he is so independent, toxically independent, he would not normally do. Alternatively, we could have him blow off something work important for something that is more meaningful, such as finding the homeless kid that ran off. Some options we could work with. Of course, this is not a fully fleshed out story. Hope y'all are still with me on this. Any additional comments, questions, thoughts as we continue? Suggestions. The story is not made yet.
So with the whole working together in his penthouse thing, there are, in a corporate situation that might be viewed as very inappropriate. And if you're trying to bring in that element of your disapproval, you get over some of these humps where it's like, this would realistically not really happen in a big corporate company. How do you address that kind of thing?
So this situation specifically happened in a book that I was reading recently. So I read Mon by Sarah Sia Glass. One of the plot points is that she does work at his home office. Um, and it is a little they do a little bit of hand wavy stuff where, oh, his assistant's there most of the time, right? And so it's fine. They're supervised. Um, Ultimately it does kind of come back to bite them in the ass, but how do you get over the unrealisticness of it is partially this is a romance, it's a fantasy that people have about their lives, and so you kind of hand wave it away. You can try to be really strict about it, but ultimately you're looking for doing something
Mm,
within reason. So like he's doing like they're working at his home office. No, it's fine. I've got cameras everywhere, so we can always show that it was just business. Something like that that kind of addresses it, but wouldn't really be like okay. Um,
mm.
else create tension in a scene. So this is getting down to the nitty gritty, talking about middle seats. Oh, yes, Laura.
It hit me literally just as you were moving on.
Mhm.
How do you assure that you don't create too much tension, especially in something like an Enemies to Lovers or Grumpy Sunshine? I've read a couple of books where my favorite trope, so I read a lot of Enemies to
Mhm.
Lovers books. I read a couple of books where it felt like resolution didn't solve many of the character issues I had with either one of the main characters because I felt like whatever the transgression was, too much to overcome, but the author didn't do the work to make sure it felt like they overcame it.
With transgression specifically. So if you're talking about a betrayal, to see a person that betrayed suffer a little, right? They gotta suffer a little bit for it. So they're gonna give up something that means a lot to them in order to prove themselves to their partner and make it right. Um, And a lot of this is like individual choice. So when we talk about enemies to lovers specifically, there has to become a point where their allegiance to each other has to outweigh their outside allegiances. So if you have them from rival kingdoms, then at some point they have to make a decision that I care more about this person than my allegiance to my kingdom or my allegiance to my family or whatever. So you have to show that happen. It can't just be one person giving up everything and enemies to lovers. They both have to sacrifice for each other. Um, Either both giving up their allegiances and forging their own path, or both kind of conceding to their allegiances and finding some sort of compromise. Transgression and a betrayal, you do have to have some sort of recompense, some sort of groveling, some sort of gave up this other thing for you so that I could make this right. Answer your question.
Yes.
So I have more thoughts on this. Okay, so as you're building your tension, you're always leaving more things for them to find in common with each other. Enemies to lovers, sometimes it feels like the only thing they have in common is their attraction to each other, which is not where you want it to be. You want them to find something on a deeper level that they understand about each other. Even if they don't understand why that person is allied with the rival king, they understand the kind of deep loyalty that they have, right? And so that even if they don't agree, they can still respect it. Kind of situation. They respect each other's skills if they're both assassins. They respect each other's or intelligence, sort of thing. So you want to, as the story is going on, the ticking clock is still getting closer, but you're slowly balancing out the number of things that they disagree on, the number of differences they have with the number of things that they have in common. You're seeing more and more why they would want to be together as opposed to all of their differences. Sometimes that can mean that some of the differences become moot. So if they're from rival clans and then the rival clans decide to bang up or they're against a third opponent, then that relieves some of the tension from their differences, some of the or the obstacles that they were facing. Helps. All right, so creating tension in a scene. So balancing the what they like about each other, what their differences are, what their obstacles are within a scene. So this is about leaving things unsaid, people thinking things but not saying them out loud. So his eyes linger on her lips, but he doesn't do anything about it. We don't see the release of that tension. We want that kiss to happen. We know they both want it to happen, and then it doesn't. And we're like, tension. They touch each other or actually touching each other sometimes, not in the way that they want to, right? So the GIF that I'm using here is the notorious GIF from Pride and Prejudice, where Darcy hands her up into the carriage and they touch for the first time, and she is completely taken aback, and he clearly has wanted to do this, right? He does a little hand stretch at the end. Um, and they're touching, but not in the way that we wanted them to touch. We wanted them to touch so much more than that, but we got like just that little sliver of it, and it was so delicious. Steps forward, they take steps back. So they find things that they have in common, but then, oh, right, we're enemies, or oh, right, we can't be together. You see them get so tantalizing close to understanding that they could be together, only for them to retreat into the excuses that they've made so far in their relationship of why they can't be together. Internal landscape shifts, so they start to regard each other differently. So maybe they were just fake dating before, but when he sees like the way she laughs at the party, he's like, oh, I actually do really like that. I want to see her do that more. I really like her. And so that shifting internal landscape, especially if you're doing dual POV where you can see both of them doing it at the same time, you see both starting to see each other differently. Don't realize the other person is seeing them differently yet. And so she loves him now and she wants to be with him, but I can't ever tell him that because he doesn't feel that way. He sees me as my sister of his best friend, right? He's never going to see me as anything else. And so you see how they change, how they feel about each other, and that creates the tension and also like kind of leads into the relief of the tension in the end. Any questions? Now, speak now or forever hold your peace on questions for this presentation. I hope you guys have gotten a lot out of it.
Question.
Yes.
So, in romance, POV is a very important thing. I'm someone who's used to writing in third and past just because I'm traditionally trained as a writer. Um, how would you suggest learning as the writer, learning how to switch your brain to being able to write in a different POV that fits the genre or that fits the.
Do not have to give up third person past to write. I will tell you that right now. You can write wonderful romance using third person past. I write wonderful romance using third person past. As long as you're keeping it limited, right? So you're doing third person limited, staying in one person's brain and not having any head hopping. You don't necessarily have to do first person in order to write romance. People that do, but it is, honestly, I think the genre is split kind of 50-50 in terms of whether people do third person or first person. So I don't think you have to give that up. I'm sorry if everyone's hearing my son cry in the background. He just woke up from a nap. So, person is much more common when we talk about YA literature, so young adult literature. In which case, I would say it's worth exploring that. But to your question of how do you like learn to do it, you just try. So I suggest doing short stories or taking a favorite scene of yours that you have already written and trying to swap the perspective into first person if you want to try that out. Um, and just going through the motions of that, seeing how it feels to try out a different POV. If there are, let me chat real quick. Yeah. If there's no other questions, I'm Daphne Strasser. You can find me at daphnestrasser.com. You can also find me at tomeworksedits.com. Professional editor. And if you want to talk to me about romance or editing or anything like that, feel free to contact me through Daphne at tomeworksedits.com, or you can find me anywhere on the internet as Daphne the Writer. So that's Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Tumblr, of all places. Feel free. I love chat about writing. Everyone, see you next time.
Daphne, this was wonderful.